know it would be helpful if I knew the person's name. With this type of book, it's really weird because one thing that I don't like about books, or like, let's not, man, I started out with such good light and it's just disappeared here. Goodbye, sun. Basically, I'm just very confused on what happened, and I need someone to explain to me what I just read. Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey, and we're about to get very, very nerdy with a year-long reading challenge. So, I'm sure many of you saw a graphic that looked very similar to this floating around the internet, which is 12 books to read this year. Usually I think it said on here like friends and family recommends and that kind of stuff. And I, on the very whim of the moment, decided that I was going to make a vlog series out of this graphic if I could get enough people to give me ideas. So I did. I posted it on Instagram, on my Instagram stories, as well as a community post here on YouTube. So if you didn't see that, feel free to continue to add books to it. And I came up with a list of 12 books. So what I've decided to do is we're going to break this up, and it's going to be a 4-part series, and I'm going to read books that you guys recommended me. Now, some of these are books that I actually do own, so like they're already on my TBR, and it's just more of an incentive to read those books. Some of them I hadn't never heard of, but sound so exciting. So the goal of this reading challenge is really to read things that you guys recommend me, but also to specifically read books that I have a legit interest in. Every single book that I have on this list is one that I'm genuinely excited about. So I'm very excited to do this. Like I said, I'm going to break this up into a 4-part series, so every 3 months we're going to do another installment of this. So it's actually currently January, but you guys will be seeing this in March, because we'll see if I can do this, but my goal is to read 1 book every month and then kind of like make this vlog less stressful and kind of do it over the course of a few months instead of like trying to read 3 in a week. But if that's how my reading goes, then that's how my reading goes. But I'm starting now because I need to read the book that I have quote unquote picked for January. So the first book that we are going to be reading for this video, I'm not going to tell you all 3 because I have things swirling in the back of my head, but just in case it doesn't actually work out, I'll just tell you as I go. But the first one is actually going to be a nonfiction book. I think it's the only nonfiction, on this list, so I'm very excited about it. And I needed a nonfiction because, as you guys probably know, my goal is to read 1 nonfiction, among other things, but 1 nonfiction every month. And the book that I had picked out as my nonfiction, I realized that I'm a dumbass and it's actually a novel, and I didn't even process that. So we needed a nonfiction, and this one legit sounds good. So the book that I am going to be picking is The Storyteller, and this is by Dave Grohl. This one was submitted by Danielle, so thank you so much, Danielle, for giving me this book idea. This is actually, I think he's the lead singer, but he is a founder of the Foo Fighters, which is I guess you'd consider rock and roll band. I have a very distinct memory of him going on the Today Show when this book came out and talking about it and being genuinely interested in it, but I didn't really do anything beyond that. So we're going to read it. I have it from my library. I have the audiobook. I think it's narrated by him, but I'm not sure about that. But most memoirs at this point are narrated by the people that wrote them. So I would be genuinely surprised if it's not narrated by him. But this is my first book. And so my goal for this video series is going to be not necessarily to tell you my whether this was a good or bad book in my opinion. Yes, I do want to talk about my thoughts on them, but that's what wrap-ups generally are for. And since I'm spacing these out, I don't want to kind of rehash my feelings over and over again. But I am going to talk about it in the sense of is this good for me? I feel like I'm saying the same thing here. I'm going to separate it in the sense of here's my in-depth critical thoughts on how this book was written and all that kind of stuff, and here's my enjoyment of it. And I want to focus more on my enjoyment in these vlogs as far as, was this one really good for me? Did I genuinely have a good time reading it? That kind of stuff. And then in my wrap-up, I can go into more details about what I thought nitty-gritty about it. So that is my goal. I probably will start this book in the next couple of days. I'm sure I'm not going to finish it before the end of the month, but we're going to try. And I'll come to you when I've started it and have a good idea of what's going on in this book. This is going to be a tough series to do since it's going to be over the course of so many months, but I'm going to try to come to you with updated thoughts in the middle of the book and then at the end of the book, instead of just genuinely like flying through a book and be like, oh, by the way, I read this thing, and then it just kind of turns up into like a wrap up of a vlog. But we're going to try to do it that way instead. So I will come back to you when I have started this book and have some more opinions on it. I'm not even really sure what we're getting into, but I do love memoirs, so I'm very, very excited about this. And again, thank you so much, Danielle, for putting this to the forefront of my attention. I'm so excited about it. But yeah, I will let you know what we think. And oh, this is going to be a fun series. I can't wait to continue with it. I never get decent lighting. It's just not my vibe. Hello! It's been a hot second since I talked to you, but I've reached just over the halfway mark in the Storyteller, and I thought I'd come to you with some general first thoughts. I didn't know what to think. So here's the thing. Let me just start with I'm liking it, okay? I'm liking it. One topic that I usually steer clear from is when it's set around a rock and roll type band that tours. It's not my thing. I don't enjoy the like, we're barely making ends meet, we're going on tour and we're doing all of these drugs and drinking all the time, and like maybe there's women involved, but like yay music, you know, like that kind of thing. It's fine, it does the job most of the time, and there are instances like, for example, with Daisy Jones and the Six, that I really enjoyed that. But this one, I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but I was a little worried, I guess, going in. And the beginning of this book is that it's him talking about the beginning of his career, where he started out with Scream and then he went to Nirvana and then he created the Foo Fighters. And so where I'm at right now, he has just started the Foo Fighters, like not just, but like we're near the beginning of the Foo Fighters. So when he was with Scream, that's what that whole like touring, they barely made ends meet. Some things that I did find really interesting was they would talk about like if they went overseas or if they went to a part of the country and they would sometimes get stranded in different places, they would have to do tours, or they would have to do like book gigs in that part of the country in order to have money to buy for gas in order to get back to where they came from, or like their home, because he's from Virginia, but I think Scream was like set in maybe Seattle. I might have made that part up. No, Nirvana was Seattle. Anyway, but it was like that kind of thing of like they were in one side of the country and they needed gas money to get home. And so they would just randomly book gigs to do that. And that was interesting because that was a newer aspect of the touring that I'd never seen before. But the beginning of this book, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel. Definitely started off rough, in my opinion, as far as where he started. Now, like I said, we've kind of, he's gotten into talking about his life after Nirvana, especially after Kurt, the lead guy from Nirvana, passing away, and he's talking about grief and that kind of stuff. So now we're getting into more of the like, I would say quote unquote heavy hitter topics, even though he started his career at 18, I think is when he started Scream, and where we're at now, he's 25. So he's still relatively young. So I'm curious where we're going to go. The Foo Fighters is what I know. I mean, like obviously I've heard of like the band Nirvana. Who hasn't heard of the band Nirvana? But they fall into that rock and roll kind of genre that I don't really listen to a whole lot, whereas Foo Fighters is more alternative, and I feel like I have heard them a little bit more, especially with them being a little more contemporary. So we've now reached a part in his life that I'm actually interested in. That sounds really bad, but like it's just the whole going on tour. I don't know why the touring aspects don't work for me, because when I read like memoirs or books set in like the golden age of Hollywood, or like following movie actors and actresses, it's like they still have to do the same thing. They have to like be really picky to make ends meet and do like really odd jobs. And that's, I don't mind reading that part. I think it's the whole like rock and roll music versus acting. I don't know. We're going on a mental loophole with me here, but that's where I'm at right now. Is at first I was like, oh no, this is not gonna end well because it was just so repetitive. It's the same stuff over and over again. It's a bunch of different stories. It's with different people, but it's the same stuff over and over again. Whereas now, he's now more secure in his life. He's got more of a constant thing, and it's really showing him as the leader starting out. So that I think is interesting, where he's going to be like building this band as the leader rather than being the bass player or being the drummer who like comes in to an already established thing. So I think that's going to be where I'm interested in. But like I said, we're just over 50%. I think I checked and it's about 54, 56, somewhere in there. So I don't know when I'm going to finish it. It might be tomorrow sometime. It might be in a couple of days. We'll see. But that is my thoughts right now. Is I was real worried when I started, but now we've hit a spot that I'm very interested in. And I'm going to have to see if I can find that interview that he did on the Today Show, because that's what made me interested in this book, like whenever it came out a few years ago, but I never did anything about it. So I'm gonna see if I can find it, because I always find it interesting when people who like authors talk about, like seeing interviews with authors. I always find that interesting because it always makes me want to read their books more. But general thoughts, that's where out. Was worried when I started. Now we're in an okay spot, and I'm actually like quite enjoying it. So this, if I rated it right now, I could expect a 3.54 if it continues in this vein. But if we go back to maybe the stuff topics that are not as enjoyable to me, then it might go back down to a 3.5. But that's where we're at. Still good. Still enjoying it. He's got a very interesting way of writing and an interesting way of looking at music as a whole, which I feel like is a very artistic way that you see a lot of people who are musicians look at their music. So that is my thoughts on it so far. I was very worried, but we're okay. Hi friends. It's been a while since I updated you, and that is because I did film an update on my final thoughts for the Storyteller, and it disappeared. I don't know what happened to that film. It was there and now it's not. So I thought I'd come and kind of finally give you my final thoughts on it. I did talk about it in my wrap up, which I did last week. I think by the time that you're seeing this, it will be been a week ago. So it's the first book in that one if you'd like to know more thoughts, because it has been a hot second. I've kind of forgotten a lot of what I thought about that book. I'm not gonna lie. We were gonna do it better in the future, I promise. But I ended up really enjoying this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Let me double check. Yes, I ended up giving it 4 stars. It got better from the halfway point once we got into, kind of like I mentioned in my last, I think it was my last update, kind of how when we got into his Foo Fighter stage, that was when I enjoyed it more. It still fell flat near the very, very end because of, I think, how he formatted this book was a little all over the place. I feel like in his head it made sense, but for me, the reader, I was really confused because there was I feel like a memoir, unless there's a very specific reason why it's not, it needs to be chronological as far as the life of whoever the memoir is about, because it can get really confusing really, really quickly. He was pretty normal as far as chronological at the beginning, but then like the last, let's say like the last 25% of the book, it got a little all over the place. He was talking about his wife at one point, and then he was telling a story in like the next chapter about his girlfriend, and I was like, oh no, did him and his wife get divorced? And then I realized, no, it was the same person, it's just they hadn't gotten married yet. And then at one point he was talking about the birth of his daughter, and then the next chapter she was 5, and then the next chapter she was 1. Like there were moments like that where it was kind of all over the place, and that didn't click with me because I really wasn't sure what was going on. And I think if it had been more straightforward, that would have made a lot more sense to me. But he has a very interesting way of looking at music, as you kind of expect an artist to do, and I still very much enjoyed my time at reading this. So, was this a good recommendation for me? In the end, yes. Would I have picked this one up if I hadn't been recommended this book? Honestly, probably not, just because again, rock and roll, going on tour, that would have turned me off from this book. But I'm glad that I did pick it up because the second half was much better, and learning about his life is really interesting, especially because like I know him as like the Foo Fighter guy. So the fact that he was in other things before that, I had no idea about, which I know is how he got his fame, was from the other stuff, but like being my age and my generation, I didn't know that. So that was very interesting to kind of connect the dots for him. And it has always kind of been in the back of my head, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning. So I am glad that I finally took the plunge and read it. So thank you so much for recommending me this book. And the next book, which I haven't actually started yet, but I do want to tell you what it's going to be, because I'm planning on reading it over the course of the next couple of days, is going to be Jewels of the Sun by Nora Roberts. This is the very first book in the Gallagher's and Ardmore trilogy. This one was recommended by Heather, so thank you so much, Heather, for putting this series on my radar. I have loved the one other book I read by Nora Roberts, so as you probably know at this point, I went out and bought all 3 books in this series. So being part of a trilogy, I feel like it's going to be really easy to dive into. So we're starting this one today. I don't really know what I'm getting into with this one. I'm very interested because the synopsis is very vague in my opinion. We follow Jude, who flees America for Ireland. She's very interested. She studies Irish folklore and that kind of stuff, and so she moves to Ireland to kind of like dive more into that, and she's kind of interested in that. And then you've also got the main male lead, who is Aidan Gallagher, and he says here he possesses an uncommon understanding for his country's haunting myths, and I think he's managing his family's pub, so I'm sure they're going to meet, and he's going to probably tell her some of these stories, and the romance is going to blossom because of that. I will hopefully come to you with a halfway point update, depending on how invested I am in this series, or how much I actually get through it, because like I said, I'm hoping to dive in. It's currently Friday, so I'm hoping to dive into this over the weekend, but we shall see. But I am very excited because I love me some Nora Roberts. So that is my next step, and I will let you know once I've started it and what I think. But I'm excited. I love folklore and mythology and that kind of stuff. And I also love Scotland and Ireland. I think those are like some of the most beautiful places in the world. So I'm very, very excited to dive into this one. And so everything about this book sounds like it should be perfect. So we'll see if that's true. Hello, I am here because I have reached the halfway point in Jewels of the Sun, and I would love. So this book, I've already tabbed it like a good number of times, honestly, which is impressive. I'm really bad at tabbing like the beginning of books. I usually tab the ends when like things are happening, but I'm like exactly like halfway. According to Goodreads, I am 51% of the way through this book. There are 20 chapters, and I'm about to start chapter 11. So I wanted to come to you with kind of halfway thoughts before I dive more into this, because this book is going to take over my life in the sense of like I could get through this very, very quickly and binge the rest of this without even realizing. So I wanted to make sure I didn't do that. But this book is so fun. So we follow our main character, Jude, who's American, and is kind of escaping her life in Chicago. She and her husband, it's been a few years now, but her husband and her got divorced after being married for less than a year, I think, at this when they actually got divorced. He had like fallen in love with somebody else, and she just kind of like took it and was like, sure, whatever. And then something kind of snapped, and she kind of hates her job. She's a professor, specifically a professor of psychology, but she likes myths and stuff, and so she basically drops everything and goes to visit her grandmother's house, great-grandmother's house in Ardmore, which is in Ireland. And so it's a little town that is so cute. And so she basically just up and leaves and decides that she's going to write a paper while she's there. Like, that's the reason that she's there. She's writing this paper on myths and legends and how they psychologically help people, and like kind of the psychology behind it. And so on the first night or second night that she's there, she goes to a bar, which is the Gallagher bar, and it is owned by a Gallagher. So Aidan is basically the owner of this bar, and his 2 siblings, Darcy, who is his sister, and Sean, who's his brother. The 3 of them kind of work in this bar, but Aidan's the one who owns it. And so like the 3 books within the series are going to follow those 3. So the second book follows Sean, and the third book follows Darcy. So I thought it was three brothers, but it's the three, Gallagher siblings. And this really just follows Jude coming to this town, being very not courageous isn't the right word, but she's a lot of self-doubt within herself. She gets to this town and finds like all the people there super attractive, and she's like, oh my gosh, I can't fit in, and doesn't believe it when Aiden finds her attractive, and he like flirts with her from day one, and their scenes are so fun and cute because I listened to this on via audiobook, and the narrator obviously is making everybody in this town have an Irish accent, and it's just like the way that he talks to her with his Irish accent is amazing, and he throws around a lot of like darlings and like those types of words, and they're just so cute coming from him, and he is convinced to like make her feel worthy, and she's never really had friends, and so she gets along with Darcy and another woman in this village named Brenna, and so like the three of them have like started to become friends, and so you really see Jude kind of let herself go in the sense of like she's always been very structured, she's always had a plan, and it's gotten her nowhere. She did a job that was expected of her, but she hated. She married someone who she didn't even love. So it's like all of those things. And so she's in this town basically getting to know people. And Aiden's coming around and telling her all these stories. And there is a magical element to it because ghosts are kind of present in this town in the sense of like people believe the fairy tales and the ghosts. And her great-grandmother, who owns the village, like the house that she's staying in was her great-grandmother's or her grandmother's cousin, or like related to her somehow. And this woman, they call her Old Maud, and so Old Maud was supposed to have been able to have like the sight and would see certain ghosts and people, and she is now starting to see them. And people are like, oh yeah, no, well, Old Maud had it, so of course she would have that gene. And so there is a aspect of magical realism to this story, which is just fascinating. The two book series that I've started by this author both have had magical elements to it, which I think is really entertaining because I start thinking they're all going to be just contemporary romances, and both of them have not been. They've had a little extra something to them. So I'm loving this. It's so fun. I think I've become obsessed with Nora Roberts' writing style is what's happening here, and I love this series. So, I mean, I haven't even finished the first book yet, but the fact that like this series, I kind of looked it up so I know who each book follows, and I'm gonna be obsessed with this series. I love the vibes. I love she kind of goes on all these walks and like goes through the countryside, which is beautiful, and her, like I said, her banter and her chemistry with Aiden is like present from day one, which is really fun to read about. But it also takes place in this beautiful place with folktales, and so a lot of the story is Aiden telling her these stories, and in doing so trying to get her kind of out of her shell a little bit. So I think it's so fun, and I love it so much. So I'm not sure if I'm going to have any different thoughts by the end of this. We'll see what happens, but this could very, very easily become a 5-star. I just love it. Everything about this book speaks to me, and I'm having the best time. Hello, I am here because today I finished Jewels of the Sun, and I gave it 5 stars. I am in love with this series. This just solidified for me that I love a good Nora Roberts book, which I kind of expected. I know it's very different in vibe, I guess, to the other series I read by her, but I had the same feelings of like, it completely took me heart and soul. I was obsessed with the story and the characters from like page 1, and there's nothing spectacular, in my opinion, about like her writing specifically. Like, it's not extra flowery or, written like this or, something like that. But there's just something about her crafting of a romance that was very nice. I gave it 5 stars. Did I tell you that already? I might have already told you that. I fell head over heels for these characters. I love a good Scottish, Irish, Highlander kind of story, and this had the Irish vibes to it. I loved that not only did we have a beautiful romance between Jude and Aiden, you also had Jude discovering herself and finding out what she loves and pursuing what she wants to do with her life, because she's at least 30, a little bit probably more than 30, and she's never been happy in her job, and she had a relationship because she felt like she needed to have that relationship. And so there was definitely some like building that she had to do, and I liked that the way that this ended was her pursuing what she wanted for her life, and Aiden just kind of fit in with that. Like, she wasn't making some of the decisions that she makes at the very end of this book, she wasn't making them because of Aiden. She was making them for other reasons. Aiden just kind of fit along with them. I really like that Nora Roberts made her have her own story and her own conclusion before we had the romantic plotline conclusion, if that makes any sense. So I loved this book. So as far as a recommendation, you done did good, okay? I am obsessed with this. I will definitely continue with the series. I'm super interested because I do know what each, like the couple that each of these books follow, and this one, I think, out of the three, now that I know all the siblings, I feel like this one's gonna be my favorite, but I'm also intrigued by the second book, which follows Sean, which is the other brother. So I'm very interested. Honestly, I'm just interested on all of them, but I loved the Scottish vibe to it. I loved the fairy tale aspect to it. I loved the mythology and the magical realism, fantastical elements to this story. Like, there's just a lot about this that spoke to me, and a lot of aspects to the story that are things that I enjoy in books. So I went in knowing this one was probably going to be a pretty higher rated book, and it was. I can't really pinpoint anything specific about this as like a plot or as like writing or anything like that where I was particularly blown out of the water, which is the same way that I felt about the other book that I read by her. There was nothing in there that like stuck out to me, except for the fact that I could not stop reading it. I was obsessed with these characters. I loved the romance between them. I loved the plot as well. Like, you have like a romantic plot line. Like, I would say this, compared to the other book I read by her, this one is more romance focused than the other one, but either way, you do have this plot line behind the scenes that doesn't suffer from the romance. It enhances the romance, and the romance enhances it. And just watching Jude discover herself was just really beautiful to read about. So I am very interested in this one. I'm curious to see where the rest of this series is going to take us, but you have found a Nora Roberts fan in me, for sure. So I need to like deep dive into her books and see which ones that she has written. I'm not sure I want to read everything she's written, because she's written like over 200 books, and that's just a lot. But I definitely want to deep dive and see what she's written that I'm interested in, because I would love to collect more books by her. I think that she could be an author that I just fall head over heels in love with. So 5 stars. This one was also a huge success, and like, yeah, that was a good recommendation. And the very last book that I'm going to be reading for this vlog is a chunk, but it's a manga, and that is 5 centimeters per second, and this is a story by Makoto Shinkai, and the art is by Kyo Seek. I think it's based on a movie, I think, but the back gives me zero information about what this is about. But this one was recommended to me by Lauren, who is my bestie. So this is also her copy that I am borrowing to read this. So full circle, if you will. But she put this one on, and it's a romance, so I'm definitely down for that. And while it's thick, I love a good manga. So hopefully we'll get through this relatively quickly in the next few days. I am going through this, and I'm seeing like very little speech bubbles. So I'm thinking this one could be a decent story, but I don't have any idea what this is about. Like, all it says on the back here is it talks about like communication and like technology, like how we use social media now, but in the past people used like snail mail and went to the library and used Polaroid film, and I'm like, what does that have to do with this? But it says it says here that it's a modern classic that adds a new level of emotion and intimacy that is unique to its source material. So I don't really know what I'm getting into, but I love a good manga, so I'm very excited about this one, and this will be the book that we wrap up this vlog with, and I'm excited. So I'll come back to you probably tomorrow. I'm thinking I'll get through a good chunk of this tonight, once I kind of know what this is about, and then I can tell you more. But you had me at manga and romance, honestly, so I am expecting good things, so fingers crossed. Hello! It is the next morning. I am about to head off to work, but I have a very suspicious feeling I'm going to finish this today, the manga today, so I thought I'd come in and just give you some quick thoughts. I'm a little over halfway through right now. I read a lot of it last night in bed, and from what I can tell right now, it follows a girl and a boy who met when they were in elementary school and became really good friends. Like, the girl transferred into the school, and so because she didn't really have anybody, he like reached out to her and they have become friends. They bonded over the fact that they both have parents whose work transfers them places, and so they both have moved a bunch. And so it's the two of them as they become friends in elementary school and like walk home together. They're living in, I believe it's Tokyo at this point, and they're just kind of sharing the places that they enjoy going to and that kind of stuff. And then she ends up having to move for one of her parents' jobs at the end of elementary school going into middle school. And so they strike up like a pen pal relationship of sorts, and then they kind of meet up one time before they both go into high school, and then it jumps to when they're in high school, and they haven't talked in a long time. So I'm not really sure where it's going, because like the plot is really just them both in their separate places wishing that they had stayed in touch with each other, and so it gives the very like sweeping romantic kind of, you know, story in the sense of it's not like a rom-com romance, but it's like a romantic romance in the sense of like it's going to be a multiple year thing, and I think they're going to, my theory is they're going to kind of like meet up later in life, and maybe once they're out of high school or in college or something like that. But there's not a whole lot left, and it's really easy to get through because there's not a whole lot of text. There is a few moments that are kind of confusing because you've got like these speech bubbles, and then you've got like the squares where parts of the letters are, and then you've got like the thoughts that are just printed on the page. And so you'll have like a text conversation or like a letter conversation that flows over multiple panes, but at the same time you also have a thought conversation, and you kind of have to like read the thought conversation and then go back and read the text because it gets a little confusing sometimes, but otherwise I'm enjoying it. I'm not really sure where we're going. There's been just definitely a few cute moments that I was like, oh, my heart, but I haven't had any like sweeping thoughts yet, but I am intrigued, so I'm going to keep going and let you know what I think when I get to the end of it. But right now I'm enjoying it, but I don't know what's going to happen next, and I'm very intrigued. Hello, it is later, same day. I'm home from work and I finished this, so let's talk. I am still conflicted on what I think about this book. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars via the compile system because there was a lot of aspects to this story and how it ended that I am very confused about. So it did not end the way I expected it to end. It had a somewhat satisfying ending in the sense of like, there wasn't one. I don't know how to explain it. Like, it was very ambiguous. There was like the possibility. You never saw what really happened at the end. And the love interest in this book is not who I thought it was going to be. There's someone who shows up in the middle of the book that I felt like we were spending a lot of time on her, and I couldn't figure out why we were spending so much time on her. And then she went away, and then she came back, and like she was how the book ended. And I'm not really sure I just have lots of questions because I'm not sure what happened. Like, I read the book, I thought about the book, I even, like, somewhat ranted about the book to my coworker, about kind of what, like, just my first thoughts once I had finished it, and, I still don't know what the purpose of this book was. Like, I don't know how to explain. I understand why there's not really a plot on the back of here, because I don't know how to explain to you a plot with this book, because there isn't one. It's basically this guy and this girl who were friends in elementary school, and they drift apart, and it, like, shapes how our main male lead looks at things. So I need to have a powwow with my friend Lauren, and I need to figure out what she thought about this book, because there's something I'm missing and I can't figure out what it is. So was this a bad recommendation? Not at all. I still enjoyed it. It was a pretty thick one, but it was really easy to get through. There was a lot of moments where I was like, oh, that's sweet, but they happened earlier on rather than later on, and I don't know if I was just, like, maybe speed reading through the end of this, and so maybe, like, a reread of some sections would make sense, but I don't know. I have questions, is basically what I'm saying. I don't have any answers, because this is it. Like, there is no more. This is the full thing. I read the full thing, and I don't know. Anyway, the moral of the story is this book left me with a lot of questions, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, and I can't tell if it worked or didn't in this book. I don't know if it's too fresh in my brain because I finished it today or what, but I have so many questions about this couple, and I feel like there's something that I'm missing, and maybe I didn't interpret some of the conversations, because there were some pretty, like, deeper conversations later on in the book between our main character and someone that he was dating at the time, and just, like, his outlook on relationships and stuff, and he's, like, rethinking some of the, like, the way that he acts around people and how he treats people, which, fair, okay, great, but is there an aspect to that conversation that I'm missing, because I feel like it wasn't as easy to understand. I don't know if I'm being very clear. Basically, I'm just very confused on what happened, and I need someone to explain to me what I just read. That's a really weird way to end this video, but basically I'm confused. But overall, first episode, first vlog, if you will, in this year-long project that I'm doing went very well. I read 3 things, which was great. That was my plan. And I have a new favorite. Like, I've deep dived into Nora Roberts' books now, and I figured out which ones I want to read. So she's, like, a new author love for me. I'm going to have to, like, dive into a lot of her stuff now. She's a lot of trilogies, which I love trilogies. They're just so nice and easy. And then I read a nonfiction that I very much enjoyed, would not have probably picked up without this. And I read a manga that I probably would never have picked up because there wasn't enough on the back to intrigue me, in the sense of, like, if I had stumbled across this in a bookshop or online or something, I would have needed more than this background or this synopsis on the back to tell me what it's about. So 2 of the 3 things in this video, actually, honestly, all 3 of them I probably wouldn't have picked up without this video. I might have eventually looked into other Nora Roberts books, maybe by the time I had finished the trilogy I had, but I wouldn't have picked it up so easily, and I wouldn't probably have stumbled across this trilogy as soon as I did, but I loved it. So overall, all 3 were hits in their respective ways. All 3 were things I would not have picked up on my own, but enjoyed for different reasons. And that's basically the point of these videos, is to read books that I would not have picked up. Some of them maybe, but I would not have maybe picked up without someone recommending it to me specifically. So I really enjoyed this one. I hope you guys did too. If you have any recommendations you'd like to add into the pot, let me know down below. Or if you're a Nora Roberts fan, let me know what your favorite series by her is, because I need some guidance on where I should go next with her. But I hope that you enjoyed this first step into this year-long project I have. I'll do another one in the summer with more books that I have planned. I have some ideas on that one, so we'll start that one relatively soon. But I hope that you guys enjoyed, and if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up or subscribe it down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media and other bookish links down below, so don't forget to check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video.